it's Ivy Slater, and you're listening to Her Success Story Podcast, a show where gutsy businesswomen share their success journey. Hello, and thank you, Valerie Young. I'm so excited to have you here today. You and I met a bunch of years ago, and I have to tell you, I'm a follower and a fan and incredibly excited to be on this interview with you today.
Well, thank you. I am honored that you asked me, Ivy. Share with our listeners a little bit. You have been a business owner, a crusader on an adventure for over 20 years, and you're not just a business owner, you're not just a speaker, you have multiple businesses, you speak all over the country and bigger, and globally, if I recall. Share a little bit, how in the world do you do this all? How did this come about? Well, one step at a time.
One step at a time. How did it come about? Let's start with how did it come about, because once I know that, I truly want to know how in the world you do this all.
Well, in both cases, on the one hand, I have the one business, which is, for people who want to figure out a way to change course, to go from having a boss to being their own boss, and then I speak on the Imposter Syndrome. And honestly, the kind of core of both of those businesses, the origins, Ivy, was personal experience, or personal crises. So on the changing course side of things, I was commuting 90 miles a day to my job in a Fortune 200 company. I was a manager in a marketing communications area, and my mom suddenly passed away, not expected, 61. She was 5 months away from retirement, and that was just my wake-up call. And, I won't bore you with all the details, but I kind of transitioned at that point into starting a newsletter for other people who realized, I don't need a new job. I don't need a new career. What I really need is a whole new life. So I started a newsletter, hard copy subscriber newsletter called Changing Course. On the Imposter Syndrome side of things, it was, again, personal experience, but it started before that, back when I was in graduate school, and someone brought in a paper called The Imposter Phenomenon Amongst High-Achieving Women by Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. Those are the two psychologists who actually coined the term the imposter phenomenon. People keep calling it the imposter syndrome. But she started reading these findings, how all these bright, capable, competent people didn't feel that way, thought they were fooling people, and they were going to be found out. And I just identified, I was nodding my head like a bobblehead doll, going, oh, my God, that's me. And then looked around, and everybody else was nodding their head. So I decided to change my whole dissertation topic and look more broadly at women's self-limiting patterns and philosophies, how we hold ourselves back. Even if all the structural barriers went away tomorrow, how would we hold ourselves back? So that was kind of the genesis of both of those businesses, with some kind of personal pain, and then realizing, well, I bet other people in this same pain and looking for something different, so let me try to figure it out.
So you didn't go out looking for the business found you, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I've always, it's funny, years ago I wrote an article called, the dust storm approach to career, finding your calling. It's like all of a sudden you're surrounded in this dust storm, all this stuff's getting kicked up, and then when the dust clears, you realize a lot of other people are in the dust storm, right? And you're like, well, let me see if I can figure out a way out of this, and if I can, maybe I can help other people get out of the dust storm. So that's kind of what I did in both situations.
So from what I know, and I'd love you to share more, the imposter syndrome piece, just, you woke up, you saw the opportunity, and there's so much to be said out there for opportunity is everywhere. Are we willing to see it when it's sitting in our face, right? You did. You saw it. You ran with it. And, one of the questions sometimes I like to ask is, what is one of the biggest surprises? And was that a surprise to you? Like the connection to people and that people grasp this and want it when you got started.
It certainly was. The first time The first time we did a workshop, it was before the internet. We put up flyers on college campuses. We put a little notice in the events section of the local newspaper. We rented a room at the the Hilton, and hoped people would show up. And like 40 women showed up, and we probably charged, $25 or something. But that was a lot of money back then, and and that's when I kind of realized, hey, maybe we're on to something here. So I can't say I was shocked just from doing my research. I knew this was an issue for a lot of women, but it was nice to see that I struck this nerve and folks actually showed up.
So in so many of the things you've done, if you look back, can you share with us any of what you attribute a great successful moment was? Like what impacted you?
I would say a few. Well, starting out, let me start on the changing course side of things. I've never been afraid of marketing. I've always seen marketing as being creative. That's why in my corporate job, I switched from being in corporate training to corporate marketing because it just felt so much more creative, like coming up with ways to get people, excited about something. So when I started the newsletter, it never occurred to me not to reach out to, USA Today or Parade Magazine or, the Boston Globe, which is what I did. So I got a lot of media early on, and I always tell people if you're starting a business, we're so focused on social media, but if you really want to build a platform, it's not as hard as you might think to get on the BBC or, get in the Wall Street Journal or what have you. So that was, something I would say, kind of surprised me about how easy it actually was. And then the other thing that was huge was I got this 6-figure book deal with Random House, and that was, truly life-changing. I had been self-published for a while, but to get that deal just really, was just phenomenal. And
I could definitely, getting a 6-figure book deal is a phenomenal thing to happen to anyone. Everybody thinks like, oh, I'll just write a book. Number one, it happens to be a lot of work to write a book.
It was the hardest thing I ever did. Hands down, hardest thing I ever did.
And you're a woman who's accomplished a lot. Why was that one of the hardest things?
Well, first of all, I don't really enjoy the process of writing. It doesn't flow off the pen, or off the fingertips. You just edit over and over, so I could easily spend a week writing 10 pages and then just redoing it, only to take a fresh look at it the next week and go, oh my God, this is crap. This makes no sense, and just trashing it and starting all over. So I really underestimated how much time it would take to do the research and really, kind of pull together coherent, thoughts. And I felt tremendous pressure. Random House was paying me $127,000. I felt like I needed to write a really good book. So it was hard. And it was also hard, I want to be completely transparent. It was also hard because it was an incredible year. It was 2008. I got this book deal in the spring, in April, and then the economy tanked in, August, September, October.
Right.
And I was committed to working on this book. So, yes, they'd given me some money, but I also had my other business to run, and or maybe it was the next year. I'm trying to think. It would all happen right around the same time. I was in a pricey mastermind group with someone, and it was a very high, very intensive time, financially and emotionally, to be trying to juggle those two things all at once, especially when I was in an atmosphere with a lot of male entrepreneurs who were very dismissive of even talking about the economy crashing being a problem. It was all just, it's really not a problem. It's like, yeah, it really was. And people would say it privately, but there was a lot of bravado to not talk about that.
It's interesting because it sounds like when you invest in a high-level group like that, you have a responsibility to the investment. You have a responsibility to the people to show up and support one another. So you have a responsibility to your clients. And when you're writing a book, you have not just a responsibility to your readers, but kind of you have to open yourself up at gut level when you do that. And that had to kind of drag you pretty damn thin.
Yeah, it did.
And I'm not just saying in the pocket, I'm saying in the emotion.
Yeah, I mean, it really did. It really did on so many levels. I mean, speaking engagements, all but dried up. Nobody's spending money on speakers at the time. Thank God for Canada. I got a lot. I did get some gigs out of Canada. And then, again, no matter how much bravado from mostly the male entrepreneurs I knew, people weren't buying. I mean, people forget it was a time when everybody was freaked out. Everybody's looking at their 401k and seeing it's half of what it was, and nobody wanted to spend money. So it was at the same time that I had to really work on this book, I also had to redouble my efforts at changing course to generate income over there. So it was a challenging time.
So from the 2009 to the book, when did the book actually come out?
2011. I got the deal. I actually think I got the deal in 2000. I want to say 7 or 8. It took me far longer than I expected to write it. But it came out in 2011, October, yeah.
The book launched, and what has happened to your businesses in this process?
Well, I think people assume if you're with a big publishing house that they're going to do a lot of marketing on your behalf. They
I
set
love
up
the
some radio
part.
interviews, and then it really is up to you. So I can't say that I saw this immediate, bump in speaking engagements. Certainly, I got more media. I got some great reviews from Publisher Weekly, and actually, I got trashed by the Wall Street Journal by a woman who is in a very conservative think tank who thought the whole idea that society sees women as less competent was just nonsense. And the good news is I got reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. The bad news is,
and they say every review is a good review. Yeah.
I mean, it was just bizarre because of it was almost like she didn't read the book. I have a whole chapter that has a lot of evidence that shows women are continued to be seen as less competent, even by other women. But anyway, so there was the Wall Street Journal. But it actually, it certainly has led to many things. Because the book is now besides English, it's in 4 other languages. So I'm doing, more internationally. And since then I've spoken at Facebook and Boeing and Apple and IBM and Intel and, Stanford. I'm just back from my 6th time being out speaking at Stanford University.
Yeah, so those listeners out there to take a look at Valerie, Imposter Syndrome, and see where she has made the impact. It shows how important the topic is, and it's not just the topic, it's that you've had for the wherewithal to notice that this is an important topic and it resonates with masses. And now the second business, so tell us today, where you are navigating these 2 businesses for all these years. What's next for you, Valerie?
Well, social media kind of also, interestingly enough, during that same challenging time, that's when social media really came along. So that was added like a new thing to have to kind of deal with at the same time. So I've kind of come to this place, Ivy, where, I just turned 63 a couple of weeks ago. I really thank you. I really like the speaking because it's just easy. I show up, I do my thing, I say thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience, and I get on the plane and I go home, and I make good money doing it. I've had the Changing Course, newsletter and the website for. I started the newsletter in '95, went online in '98. So I'm in this interesting kind of succession planning, trying to think, okay, now how do I want to kind of pass this along to some of the coaches that I've trained or, someone else who can kind of take it and run with it, in a way that, I just don't have the same focus and energy and time now that I'm doing 2 things as I did, 15 or even 10 years ago. So I'm in that mode of trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with this thing that I've created, and how might somebody, take it and go out and change some lives?
So I have to ask, any surprises along the way? Has there any, in your journey of entrepreneurship, of success, of speaking, of getting a six-figure book deal, of speaking at some of the most renowned companies in this country right now, what has been like that surprise that's come your way?
Well, I think the surprise, and this kind of goes back to more when I started working in a corporation, is that they're just people. Back then I used to say it was just white men in suits in corporations.
We're hoping we have a few more females in suits or dresses.
Yeah. This is kind of back in the day.
Back in the day.
I don't know if that surprised me, but I know, a lot of the focus for me in my corporate work is that maybe because I've been in the corporate world, that I don't just look at imposter syndrome as an individual issue, but that there are, by that I mean it goes beyond feelings, and it manifests itself in behaviors, and that those behaviors have costs to organizations. So I very much see it as that organizations need to look at what are the consequences when bright people in your organization, become workaholics, or they procrastinate, or they fly under the radar. And I also have a background going way back, long before they called it diversity and inclusion, that looked at life and looked at people through the lens of, kind of our social identity. So, I'm actually kind of coming at this at the right time in history, I think, because I very much look at it that imposter syndrome is also a diversity and inclusion issue. And the reason I say that is whenever you belong to a group for whom there are stereotypes about competence,
right,
then you're more likely to have imposter feelings. So all that is to say, it's kind of an exciting time right now. It's interesting, Ivy, and you know this from your own experience, when all of a sudden these threads from your life that don't seem like they may connect all start connecting in a way that, allows you to be of service to other people.
Yeah. And when those threads connect, sometimes we're the ones who are most surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's actually can be surprising and exciting. I'm going to say, too, what initially surprised me is I thought success would come more quickly. I think, and I know a lot of people think, okay, I'll quit my job and I'll start this business and you replace my salary. But it takes, you have to build this foundation, and unfortunately not many people are willing to kind of go through those tough few years to get to the good stuff a few years in.
So there's the great analogy of, oh my goodness, this actor or actress, right, was just discovered, after 20 years of commercials and print advertisement and small bit royals and Law and Order and this, that, and the other thing. They are now discovered.
Right. You're this overnight success that's been, working at it for, a decade. Right.
So have to ask, I'm not a big person for advice because I think advice kind of relates that somebody knows something better than somebody else. So it's not a word I usually look at. But I do like some great tips. So any tips for women out there, women who are navigating the journey of success? I don't look at success as a destination, but it's a journey. Any great tips on how to either stay in the journey, enjoy the journey, or what tips from Valerie Young out there?
Well, I would say to recognize that success is complicated. And no one tells us that. We think,
I'm sorry, touche.
Well, what I mean by that is that, let me go back to imposter syndrome. Sometimes people might be resisting putting themselves out there, kind of stepping it up in a big way, and we think that it's fear. But it might be that you're resisting kind of success on someone else's terms. I felt early on that I had to build an empire, and I didn't want to, and I thought it was because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to. And I came to realize years later, I didn't want an empire. I left the corporate world because I didn't want a hierarchy and complexity, and I didn't want 50 employees, and I'm a lifestyle entrepreneur. So once I figured that out, success got far less complicated because I figured out how to kind of do it on my own terms. And on the one hand, I say it's complicated. On the other hand, it's insanely easy. It's in the sense that fundamentally, it doesn't come down to being smart or talented. Fundamentally, it comes down to effort. That's it. Getting up,
I like that,
every day, doing the work. Now, for folks listening from the corporate world, you're probably already working too hard. So the opposite is probably going to be true for people who have a job, which is, okay, you're probably already working way harder than you need to or should. Now you need to make sure you start asking for what you need and deserve in terms of money, promotions, opportunities.
Nice. Beautifully said and very, very true. So people who want to know more about Valerie Young, or shall I say Dr. Valerie Young, and Imposter Syndrome, because I have to tell you, I will be the first one to say, like, I'm a skimmer in reading because there's so much material to read that I at least enjoy to read. Like, I'm always interested in so much. I think I read your website word for word for word because I was just like, and then I went back, I was like, I have to read this piece again. I loved it. So how could people find out more? How could they find out more about you and the Imposter Syndrome?
Sure. Well, it's pretty easy because they just go to impostersyndrome.com, and pretty much everything they would need to find should be right there. Social media, Twitter, Valerie Young, and Facebook, Dr. Valerie Young.
And I'm going to really encourage everybody, you want to be following Valerie. She's all over the place. She's speaking at amazing places, and you'll never know where you can connect with her. And I have to tell you, she's brilliant and lovely to be with.
Oh, you're so sweet.
And on that note, next time you're in New York, let's put that fun piece into the agenda.
Absolutely.
Valerie, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time out of what I know is a very, very busy schedule of yours to join us and join our listeners for a little bit and to share your charm, your smarts, and your brilliance, and to share forward with women who are in the journey. We're all in it together.
Well, thank you so much, Ivy.